It's not that the imported jaw crusher is unaffordable, but that handcrafted ones offer better value for money. In Peshawar, Pakistan, they can manufacture the pulleys for jaw crushers in this small workshop. Despite their relatively simple processing equipment, the finished products they produce are extraordinary. Meanwhile, traditional molding methods cannot be used in a foundry in Karachi, Pakistan, due to the large diameter of the crusher pulley. When molding is required, they have to use sandpits to assist. This is why they dig pits right in their workshops. After the craftsmen skillfully spread the molding sand, the bottom of the pit becomes very smooth. Next, the iron sheet-welded sandboxes are evenly placed in the center of the sandpit using a crane. To prevent the iron frames from moving during casting, the entire edge must be filled, and the molding sand needs to be shaped with a scraper to ensure the edge is completely flat. This allows the cover to completely cover the sand pit, preventing molten iron from leaking at the joints. After completing the sand pit, since the sides of the pulleys have fan-shaped grooves, sand cores need to be made to mass-produce molded pulleys. The sand cores are produced by compacting sand and then directly demolding it. These sand cores serve as placeholders. After all the sand cores are heated and hardened, they are placed according to requirements. The spacing between them represents the pouring space. After the master meticulously flattens the sand with sand, the inner mold is divided into upper and lower layers due to the size of the pulley. The 4 sand blocks used for height adjustment correspond to the 4 standard holes on the pulley. At this point, the entire mold interior meets the requirements for use. The mold-making process is quickly completed after sealing with pre-hardened sand blocks. Once everything is correct, all these weight-bearing blocks are pressed on top of the mold to prevent molten iron from overflowing during pouring. To save costs, the materials used in their workshop are all recycled scrap iron. Although the scrap iron contains various other materials, workers throw it into the furnace without hesitation because a large pulley requires a substantial amount of molten iron. As more and more scrap iron is added, the temperature of the melting furnace gradually rises. After waiting for the scrap iron's melting point, workers use a crane to pour the molten iron into the sand molds. While ensuring that the temperature of the molten iron does not drop, they pour it into the molds underground while it's still hot. Although the temperature of the molten iron during pouring is very high, it shows no signs of backing down. Once the overflow of molten iron is observed at the mold's observation port, the entire mold is poured. During this process, they need to insulate and cool the raw castings. After letting them sit overnight, they are demolded directly using the force of a crane. Since the temperature of the molten iron during pouring is very high, as soon as it comes into contact with the sand, it immediately hardens. In this situation, they can only use a hammer and chisel to break down the solidified sand. Considering the slow manual processing, the master borrowed an electric chisel from a neighboring workshop. With the powerful hammering of the electric chisel, all the embedded sand cores are entirely cleared. Due to the rough surface left by the sand casting, the pulleys need to be cut finely using extensive cutting tools to meet usage requirements. For a pulley like this, which only needs to be connected to the eccentric shaft with a belt, the pulley with a smoothly cut surface only requires a tangential knife to cut the inner walls of the holes. The standard for rough processing is to ensure smoothness, so their processing speed is relatively fast. So, the jaw crusher pulley cast from scrap iron is now completed. What do you think of the Pakistani master's skills?